Hello, my loves. How are you? Sorry, I didn't vlog yesterday. I passed out. I got home. I had a quick conference call. I spoke with Lothar, Anton, and then I was laying on the bed just kind of putzing on my phone. And the next thing I remembered, or next thing I was aware of, the alarm was going off. So sorry I missed yesterday. But I did tell you that I wasn't going to promise every single day. So this will be days 5 and 6 of my research trip, but days 2 and 3 at the Textile Museum. So I did a total of 3 days. My last day was today. I don't want it to be my last day. It's amazing. So I will try to recap today and yesterday and today. There wasn't anything huge or groundbreaking or like, oh my gosh, this is the most amazing thing on earth that happened yesterday. But it was yet another day of amazing research doing a bunch of textiles. So the way it kind of worked was on the first day, I primarily did textiles from the Indian subcontinent. And then at the end of the day, I think I did one or two just other random, like, ooh, I can't wait to see this. And since I could choose which order I wanted to have all the textiles pulled in, I picked like a Ferrer or a German Lower Rhine area 13th, 14th century cited by Ferrer, not necessarily in Ferrer's collection textile. So that was day one, or day one was mostly Indian subcontinent and then a couple extra. Day two, I chose to mostly focus on Pre-Columbian textiles. I think the oldest one that I looked at was somewhere like, I think 2nd century BCE. It may have gone as early as 4th century BCE, all the way up to the 15th century. And I believe that most of them were from Chile, or most of them were from Peru, but one of them may have been from Chile or Peru. So most of the ones that I looked at were very, very similar to the ones that I saw when I was in California at both LACMA, the Los Angeles County Museum of Art, and the Natural History Museum of Los Angeles County. And so it's really so cool to finally be like, oh yeah, this is similar to those, and like have a baseline frame of reference. So that when things are unusual, and this is the whole point of this research, so when things are unusual, like, oh, that has a different twist, because most everything in South America is an S-twist, for example. And most of the things that are printed in I don't want to say South America, that's not necessarily accurate, in Peru, most of the things that are, most of them are plain weave, although sometimes we'll see a gauze weave or like a spring weave. Most of them are cotton, but occasionally sometimes they have some blend or maybe your wholly camelid hair, for example. So it's really fascinating as this body of knowledge is starting to grow and build to be able to be like, yes, that is consistent with other ones that I have seen. And so I understand more now, because I never understood how museums dated things, right? Like, well, unless you radiocarbon date it, how do you know? Well, they know actually less from radiocarbon dating, which happens less frequently, and more from, stylistically, where was it found, what were the colors, what were the apparent materials. And so they're really sort of categorizing based on what they know from other things. And that is why this is so important to do what we're doing with printed textiles and painted textiles, is because the last time these things were categorized was 140 years ago by a dude whose collection was mostly counterfeits. So that's why we're trying to build this knowledge, and it's so important. And it's interesting, I've had some people ask me why painted and printed textiles, or why from that time period and not other time periods where the technology was better and the artistry was really just much more amazing if you're comparing, right? And I think the thing that's most exciting to me about printed and painted textiles is this was the first form of self-expression, possibly with the exception of jewelry, which also seemed, as far as we can tell, prehistorically, jewelry was usually like sewn on. So like a necklace was sewn on, right? The earrings would be sewn on to like a hat or whatever. So with the possible exception of jewelry, we can't necessarily put like which came first, egg or the chicken, right? Those two things, painting on textiles or decorating on textiles with designs, motifs, etc., with pigments as opposed to weaving them, and jewelry were the first forms of self-expression. It's the first time we as human beings wanted to say, no, I want to look a little different. I want to look special. I want to feel pretty. I want to feel good. I want to scare people. I want to, be intimidating. This form of self-expression that developed prehistorically and arguably, I'm going to say this, arguably independently sprouted up around the world, okay? That's something most people don't really discuss, is we have evidence of this, of painted and printed textiles springing up in Asia, South America, North America, by the way, Africa, and, Europe was kind of late to the game, but we have it springing up in all these areas, arguably, well before they all had contact with each other, unless you just kind of go with the theory that everybody came from Pangaea and spread from there, and maybe that is what it is, right? But we have printed and painted textiles prehistorically for just about every area. So that's why it's so exciting to me that, I'm wearing a lovely print today. This is wild and zany because I'm very boring and normal. So anyways, I just love the topic, obviously. So yesterday was primarily pre-Columbian Peru and Chile, and there was some really interesting ones that I got to see. There was one that is unlike any that I have seen, and it was actually radiocarbon dated, so in that regard, at least the fabric and the dyes have been authenticated to be of that time period. So it was like, wow, this is bizarre. It's just really strange. So I will put a link to that in the comments or the description below once this gets posted, because I was like, I don't even, like, it almost, I said to the curator, I said, I'm not questioning its authenticity. But when I look at this, it almost looks like somebody who was just doodling on the bottom of their page, right? And they were drawing these designs, which are not at all consistent with the usually very geometric, very stylized animals, etc. Like, these are kind of like realistic animals, and they're like swirls and doodles and stuff. So that was cool. So that was primarily my day 2 at the Textile Museum. And the cool thing was she had several meetings and things that she had to go to, so she wasn't necessarily able to sit with me during every single one on that day. But what she did do is, like, every couple, she would come over and then she would pull up the database, and we would update the database with any other additional information that I was able to glean from my observations. We would make corrections, and then if there were things where I'm like, hey, I don't really know, that's like maybe questionable, she'd put a notation in this, observations based on microscopic analysis by Tanya Brown of the Printed Textiles Project. This is questionable. More research needs to be done. Like, it's weird. It's weird. I'm grateful, but it's weird. So day 1, primarily Indian subcontinent. Day 2, primarily pre-Columbian, although I started at the very end of the day on a Chinese piece. And then day 3, the first half of the day was primarily on Chinese and Japanese pieces that I was fortunate to be able to look through and see, including at least one piece that is listed as a garment, and we're not sure what part or which garment it would have been. So I made really detailed notes on the construction so that I can go home and try to reconstruct it, because there was a part of it, we both thought that maybe it was the sleeve, right? Because there appeared to be an arm's eye, and then it appeared to have, like, on the bottom of kimonos, for example, or other similar things, it would kind of curve, right? See what I'm doing? This is my super technical description. So it had that curve, okay? But then it also seemed to be sewn in a place where you couldn't actually get your arm in. And so we weren't sure if the sewing in place was done by the textile conservators who were just trying to, like, neatly put this into a bundle, which is what we both think was the case, or if it was actually sewn like that, and then we have no idea what part or what garment it would have been. So I'm going to play around with it and take out the sewing where we think that the conservators put it in, and then maybe play around with it. And I will need those of you who do research in, I think it was 11th, 8th through 11th century China. So those of you that do research in the area, you can help me out. Help me test. Let's figure this out. So I ended yesterday on that. I didn't quite finish getting all the way through all of my analyses, so I started today with that. And then I looked at a couple more Chinese pieces, and then I think one or two Japanese pieces. And then she had said to me yesterday, she's like, well, tomorrow at 3, we're having a staff only internal tour of the Indian textiles from the past 1,000 years exhibit, which, by the way, is the exhibit that I tried to go to on Monday, but they were closed on Monday because all of DC was closed down due to mayoral orders for Omicron/COVID precautions. So I wasn't actually able to go to the exhibit on Monday, but I really wanted to go. And so she's like, well, at 3 o'clock on Friday, we're doing a staff-only internal, get all the juicy details behind the scenes, talk to the people that put the exhibit together, as well as the people that actually like created the exhibit, the actual like construction of the exhibit, and get all the behind the scenes details. It would take away from your opportunity to look at more textile. I was like, yes, I would like to go on this tour. I can come back to DC. I cannot necessarily get another opportunity to see this exhibit because they're also not open tomorrow. They're not open on Saturday. So I was like, I'm not going to get to see this exhibit. So we went to this exhibit, and it actually had more than 1,000 years. It had 1,200 years of textiles, but they said 1,200 years of textiles didn't nearly ring off as well as 1,000 years of textiles. So the oldest one I got to see actually dated to the 8th century, I believe, maybe early 9th century. And it was actually found in Egypt, but definitely originated in India. And so that was, of course, very exciting because that's like kind of my sweet spot when I love Egyptian and Indian textiles from that time period. So we saw just the most incredible exhibit. If you have the opportunity to go to Washington, D.C. before this exhibit ends, it's called Indian Textiles, 1,000 Years of Art and Design. You should go. So I went to the exhibit. It was like a 45-minute tour, 2 levels, 3 sort of thematic areas, heard all kinds of cool, juicy details. And then at the end of it, it was at that point close to 3:45, 4 o'clock. And so I only had about an hour left to wrap up what I was doing. And so I said to the curator, hey, really quickly before we go back downstairs to the textile area, I want to run to the gift shop so that I can get the catalog from the exhibition. And she's like, okay. And so she walked in there with me, and then she said something to the gal, and then she's like, well, I said, well, I have to run back downstairs to grab my wallet. I didn't bring it upstairs with me. She's like, okay. So she's like, hang on a second. And so I was waiting in one area for her, and then she comes back out of the gift shop. And then we go back downstairs, and she's like, they're just going to bring it down. And I was like, yeah, but I have to pay for it. And she's like, no, it's complimentary. And I was like, what? So check it out, yo. Oh my god, it's so big. Look how thick. Look how thick. So he was telling us today that the initial researched over 300 textiles where they were trying to figure out like what should go in and what is, learning and what is the best of the best. And then they narrowed it down to like 180 or 190 textiles that are included in this book. Mamma Jamba. Oh, shiny. And then in the exhibit itself, I think he said they had to narrow it down to like 92 or 96 textiles. So, but the rest of the textiles that are not in the exhibit are in this book. So you guys need to bug me to bring this to everywhere I go so you can see it too. I am so gobsmacked and flattered. And I said to her that wasn't necessary. I was happy to pay and contribute. She said, no. I really want to foster the learning in those that clearly have a love for the area. And you have contributed so much to the museum with all of your work. You did work for us. So this is just one of the ways that we can pay you back. And I was like, oh, you got it backwards. I can't wait to look at this. I haven't opened it yet because I know if I open it, I will not do any other work. And today is Friday night and I leave DC tomorrow morning. I have to check out here by 11. And it's like, I don't know, 8 or 9 o'clock right now. So I have a lot of packing and sorting and organizing to make sure I don't like just throw everything in the car like a hot mess tomorrow morning. So I haven't opened it yet. It's kind of like Christmas, right? I'm keeping it in the wrapper, the wrapping paper, so that I don't open it. But while I'm in Rhode Island, I will definitely be taking a lot of looks. I wish I did take a bunch of pictures. I will post those pictures, but the pictures are not going to do it justice. It was just amazing. So, so the good news is I have a standing invitation to go back to the Textile Museum anytime I want. I said the next time I'm in DC, I might itch. Oh, so it was really interesting because some of their textiles that I wanted to see that I had on my like wish list were not available because they had previously been in an exhibit sometime in the last, 3 to 6 months. And then apparently before they return them from exhibition to the storage area, they put them in a freezer to basically kill all of the bugs and mites and anything that could have laid eggs or tried to house itself in there, just, to preserve the textiles. So there was like maybe less than half a dozen, 4 maybe or so, 4 or 5 textiles that I was not able to see because it was in what they call it the Jack Frost cart. So it was in the Jack Frost cart. So I was like, well, the next time I'm in DC, I'll come back and visit. She's like, absolutely, come on back. Oh, and then this morning before the tour, these 2 ladies came to the storage area, and so they were talking, and I was trying not to like I could kind of hear what they were saying, but I was trying to like kind of mind my own business because, being professional or whatever. And then I heard the curator mention my name. And she's like, well, let me introduce you really quick. So she brings the 2 ladies over. And one is a textile conservator. And the other is that textile conservator's like student, intern, employee kind of person. And so the curator's like, you got to show them your microscope. This thing is amazing. So we all had fun for like 20 minutes geeking out. Because I was actually looking at this particular textile that had been listed as gilded. And it was very interesting. So it was this Chinese textile made for the Tibetan market. And it had little mini strips of leather that had been interwoven into the silk. And so every 4th warp thread, the warp would come up over the leather to like keep it in place. But otherwise, the leather was on top of all the other warp threads. And so it kind of created this really cool effect, right? And so it had the little leather strips, definitely had some kind of pigment, maybe a binder and a pigment, I'm not sure, that had been painted on each of these individual strips, right? Before it got it woven into the textile. But it was originally listed as gilded, which is one of the reasons why I wanted to see it, because anything that is gilded is in my wheelhouse, or not wheelhouse, but my area of interest. I wouldn't say wheelhouse. I'm still learning. So I'm looking, and I'm like, this thing is not, I'm not seeing any gilding. There's not a fleck of gold. And while there may be a binder, the binder is directly under all this pigment that I'm seeing. And once you have seen gold under a microscope and binder under a microscope, it's very distinct every single time. It looks, and I've seen it from India, Yemen, Japan, Egypt. I don't know if I've seen anything from Europe. I've definitely seen it from multiple geographical places. And the binder, by and large, looks much the same. And the gold always. Like, it's a very distinct. You know what you're seeing, right? So I'm looking at this textile, and the 2 gals come over with the curator, and I'm like, this is what I'm looking for, and this is what I'm finding, and so far I'm not seeing any gold. And they're like, well, how do you know what gold looks like? And so I think we had another piece out that did have gold, or I pulled something up really quick and they're like, oh, okay, yeah, there's a big, like, you know it when you see it, right? So I ended up talking to them for a little while. They were very excited about the microscope. Everybody loves this microscope. I should buy stock in this Celestron. It's the Celestron 44302-B is the model that I have, but I don't believe that model is in production anymore. But you can get the -C on Amazon for like $150. So well worth it if you want to analyze things. I actually bought a much more expensive microscope, which I have used, but don't use nearly as much as the other one, which I got for $40 from somebody who bought it for $80 originally, used it once, and then just never used it again. And I need them through my weaving guild, and they're like, "I'll give it to you for $40." I'm like, "Yes." So they ended up going away, and then I spent probably 40 to 45 minutes in like grid pattern looking at this textile, every single inch of this textile, to see if there was any gold, and there was not a single fleck, none. So we updated the listing in the museum's collection database, and then later on, as the curator was like pulling out other textiles that I was hoping to see, she's like, "Oh, this looks like it'd be of interest to you." And of course, it was a gilded textile from China from, I think, the 12th century, either 11th or 12th, and it was stunning. It was beautiful, and so right away I said, "Let me show you." So it was another example. I was like, "You can see the binder, even where places visually you don't see any gold. As soon as you put the microscope on and just move it around a little bit, you can always find some flecks. Like if gold has been on the textile, there will be some trace of it, even if it's not visible to the naked eye." Which really makes me want to see the one that is in the Swedish Historical Museum that was buried in Birka grave 944, which Agnes Geyer says had gold flecks on it, only visible via microscope as well as binder. So maybe Vikings had access to block printing. I'm getting off topic. So still same topic, but I'm meandering. Sorry. So I finished out my day. Love that woman. She's amazing. Have a standing invitation to go back. The good news is I probably actually will be back in Washington, D.C. sometime in the next, I'm going to say 1 to 3 years, because there's a lot of places I still have to go to. But I was only able to see one collection from the Textile Museum, which was called the Kotzen Collection. It's the Kotzen Textile Traces Study Center is where I was at. But then there's like the Avenir Foundation, and then there's the Textile Museum proper. So there are multiple collections that I still would love to go see. It was funny too, because at least 2, maybe 3 of the things that were on my wish list to see in the Textile Museum proper were actually on exhibit in this Indian textiles exhibition. So I got to like longingly see and proverbially pet from afar these textiles, but I didn't actually get to see them. Also very interesting, I got to see 2 or 3 other textiles that were very similar to other textiles that I have already studied. So it was really kind of cool to be like, yep, that's Indian in origin, but it was made for the Indonesian market, probably found in Sulawesi. And then I walked up and sure enough, that's what it says. I was like, yep, knew that one. I'm not trying to be arrogant. It's just funny because like you've seen it, right? So that's it. That's my experience at the Textile Museum. I did have a quick conversation with the Brooklyn Museum, which is the museum that I was supposed to see last week. And there is the opportunity that I could go when I have 2 weeks in Rhode Island, and I'm supposed to be returning back to work on Monday, February 21st. There is a possibility, I've talked to Brooklyn Museum, of going to them on February 22nd and 23rd, so the Tuesday and Wednesday. So I would basically have to find something to do in Rhode Island and or New York on that Saturday, Sunday, and then Monday, and then go 2 days to Brooklyn Museum. However, that leaves me out of work for 1 more week, and this is an unpaid work trip. It's doable, but it's like, And I heard back from the Met Museum this morning. Yes, this morning. And they sent back a bunch of information about my wish list and then asked me to like kind of prioritize things, and they're still trying to coordinate things. So I spoke with my partner today and I was like, I could. And he's like, yeah, you could. You may, part of me thinks just bang it out, right? While you're out there, go ahead and do it. And then, of course, I could use the grant to do it. Or I said the other option is I'm going back to New York sometime soon. And I hope to get 1 to 2 weeks in New York at the Met Museum. So while I'm at the Met, I can just hopefully coordinate with the Brooklyn Museum and do my 2 days at the Brooklyn Museum. So I don't know 100% for sure what I'm going to do yet, but very strongly inclined to just trying to roll it into my next New York trip, which will hopefully happen sometime in 2022. If it doesn't, that's okay. I believe it will. I mean, but who knows? Who knows? So that is the wrap up of that. I've already mentioned that I drive to Rhode Island. I think the drive is somewhere around 4 to 6 hours. Not too bad. I will be there for 2 whole weeks, working all 5 weekdays at the RISD Museum, the Rhode Island School of Design Museum. And I believe that there is going to be a student that will be accompanying me for some of it because they're particularly interested in this field as well, but I don't know for sure. I'm just find out when I get there, but that was mentioned as a possibility. And then the weekend in between those 2 weeks, there is an exhibit in the Harvard Arts Museum, which is only about 45 to 55 minutes away from where I'm staying in Rhode Island. That is, I forget the name of it. Something like inscribing textiles. Scrivening, I'm blanking. So I'll be going to that. But I'm talking a lot, so I'm going to leave it at that. Bye. Love you. See you tomorrow-ish, maybe Monday. Don't know. Bye.